Welcome, everyone. I'm Margaret Leinen. I'm the director of Scripps Institution of Ocean. You have to put the. Welcome, everyone. I'm Margaret Leinen. I'm the director of Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. And I'm happy to welcome you to this special session telling you about a very special meeting that took place about a month ago. Several of you may be aware of an annual forum called Science and Technology in Society that takes place the first week of October every year in Kyoto. And it was started 21 years ago by Minister Omi, who really wanted to have a place where the leading scientists in academia, in business, in government could come together to discuss some of the most important science issues facing us all. And he started this unique forum, which has become a place that attracts the leaders of science foundations, of national academies, of business, and of academia. And the program has a few topics that go through the forum from year to year, and one of those is the ocean. But it's one small session that's only a couple of hours long. Whoops, I lost the... And 16 years ago, a group of climate scientists said the ocean and climate were so important that they really had to be at the Science and Technology and Society Forum annually. And they began what's called Regional Action on Climate Change. And like the COP, it really focuses on solutions and what is actually being done, what can be done to address climate change and the impacts of climate change. And this last year, the whole day session of the Regional Action on Climate Change focused on ocean for the first time. And we're going to go out of the order that we had established here because Dr. Sarah Gelden is not able to be with us, and Professor Kunduri must go to another meeting at 2 o'clock. So what we're going to do is start off with her presentation, and she does have a number of slides that talk a little bit about the history of the Regional Action on Climate Change so that you can put that in context. And I think the important thing for us here is to understand that we have a sister organization that has started adopting work on the ocean's role in climate change, and can be part of this discussion that is fostered at the Ocean Pavilion each year. So Phoebe, I'm going to turn things over to you. Phoebe is a professor in economics at Athens University of Economics and Business and University of Economics and Business and Technical University of Denmark as well, and chair of the World Council of Environment and Resource Economists Associations. She's also chairing the SDSN Global Climate Hub and director of, how do you say that, Aphoria? Aphoria.
Which is the Greek word for sustainability.
Yes, and we're going to hear more about that as well.
Thank you so
Phoebe.
much, Margaret. So thank you very much for inviting me to the Ocean Pavilion. This is one of the most important pavilions in COPs because ocean is very important for climate change, of course for climate mitigation and also climate adaptation. So if I can have my slides, this is the order I'm gonna present the different issues. First, I'm gonna tell you what my team is doing on the oceans, and then I'm gonna refer to our work for the UN World Ocean Assessment. So it's an assessment that the UN does on oceans. And finally, I'm gonna combine everything with the work we do as the Regional Action for Climate Change, the RACC, within the STS Forum, which is the forum that Margaret was referring to, the Science Technology for Society that is happening every year in Japan, bringing together all the leading scientists across the world. But the important thing is that these scientists do not have to be part of only academia, but also foundations and businesses and also governments. This is important because these are the stakeholders, together with the civil society, that need to sit around the same table and co-design the pathways towards sustainability. So Aphoria, it's the Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation on Sustainability. It's a big team of more than 200 researchers and basically puts together a number of research and innovation centers, a number of innovation accelerators, a number of science policy networks, and academies and scientific associations that I work with. And not just work with, but direct or chair or co-chair. So our work, all of our work, is really focused on one important thing: quantifiable and detailed transition pathways for the implementation of sustainability. So we work in more than 120 countries with many hundreds of competitively financed research projects that focus on quantifying where we are in terms of implementation of the SDGs and try to develop very detailed pathways in terms of the optimal mixture of technologies, policies, and fiscal and financial instruments that will get us where we want to go. And where we want to go are the SDGs, this very holistic framework of 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets within them. That, of course, includes the oceans. SDG 14, it's about life below water. It's about the sustainability of seas and oceans. And the interesting thing is that nowadays we have, across the world, policy transpositions of the SDGs. That is to say, we have different countries and different regions across the world covering almost the whole planet with policy frameworks that detail how a country, a region, a local authority can change, can transform. And these policy frameworks are not just targets, they are regulations, they are laws, and they guide the transition. They incentivize the transition. One of the major themes that we work in is, of course, blue economy, is, of course, the sustainability of oceans. So we work on understanding the ocean ecosystems. This is a very interdisciplinary team. We work on understanding how the spatial planning of oceans should be transformed and developed, trying to integrate the resilience of ecosystems in the oceans, trying to integrate energy production from the oceans, trying to integrate marine transport, all other transport that takes place because of fisheries, because of regulating activities, including aquaculture, including touristic actions, including all different economic and human activities that take place in the oceans. So it's not just blue economy, we also work on sustainable finance and ESGs and SDG measurements, climate neutrality and resilience, the land use and the water, food, energy nexus, and of course innovation and capacity building. And in saying that, I just want to explicitly recognize the interconnectiveness of all the systems. This is to say that when you work with the oceans, you need to work with the energy system of the land as well. Because if you are producing energy from the ocean, that needs to be connected with the energy system on the land. When you work with the oceans, you need to acknowledge fisheries, and fisheries are part of the well-being of coastal and also inland populations. So what is important here is to understand the interconnectiveness, and this is the major vision of the Global Climate Hub of UNSDSN. UNSDSN is a global network of more than 2,000 institutions across the world that is trying to facilitate the implementation of the SDGs. The Global Climate Hub that I chair has this structure, and our mission is to develop an integrated transformation pathway for each and every country in the world. And the logic of the Global Climate Hub is to create a digital twin that integrates the natural systems with the socio-economic systems. It is important to get the socio-economic systems in the integrated framework of analysis, so that you can talk to policymakers and you can devise development plans that are really understandable and implementable. So we have 3 layers there. The first layer is the interdisciplinary science, which is basically mathematical modeling. We downscale climate scenarios. We investigate the optimal mixture of energy sources for the energy system. And not only that, but we also devise energy corridors between countries in order to get the least cost allocation of energy production, focusing, of course, on renewables. We integrate that with the mobility system. Then we integrate and analyze the land use system. Then we integrate and analyze health systems and innovation systems. And after all these systems analysis, the mathematical models give you some transition pathways for these systems, how they should evolve by 2030 and 2050 in order to become climate neutral. And there, all of these suggestions are integrated with the socioeconomic system. To answer the question, how are we going to finance this transition that the systems need in order to get us to climate neutrality and climate resilience, and how we are going to protect the vulnerable, those that cannot pay for the transition. In doing so, we continuously interact with the other layer of the Global Climate Hub, which is intradisciplinary, co-designing with the stakeholders. We have living labs in each country which are made of stakeholders, the representative mixture of stakeholders, and at each point of our analysis, we get them involved in order to get their wisdom, their local experience, knowledge, expertise, but also to help them acquire the capacity to become a real stakeholder and shareholder in all these development plans. And of course, everything at the third layer is stored here, which is the infrastructural background, the digital infrastructure of the Global Climate Hub, where all the data, all the models, all the outputs are stored, are open access, and are also supported in their accessibility with tools, decision support tools, visualization tools, and also training courses so that people can use this. So moving along to focus more on the ocean work, I am the lead author of the United Nations Third World Ocean Assessment, and there I lead the chapter on human well-being. So I will very quickly show you how an economist tries to bring well-being into the management of ecosystems. And although it's not a holistic presentation of that chapter, it focuses on one point that I think is difficult to get across, but it's very important. So let me start by saying that the UNSDSN is producing every year a report that showcases where we stand on the implementation of each and every goal, 17 goals, 169 targets within them. This is our only global agenda. This is the only agenda that has been signed by 163 countries. And you can see that SDG 14 is red, which means major challenges, serious challenges in its implementation. Implementation below 60% of what is needed in order to have full implementation. And if you look at all our ecosystems, the first map is about food systems, the second is climate system, the third is land use systems, the fourth is ocean and sea systems, and the fifth is water systems. They are all red. The more red one, the one that is has most red area is the ocean systems. So we are not performing. We need major action. And if I am leading the co-leading the European report of SDSN, this is the same in Europe. This is the same in all regions of the world. The oceans are not protected. The oceans are not resilient. The oceans cannot provide us with the ecosystemic services that can help in facing climate change. And it's a very detailed report, completely open access. The data is open access. The models are open access. The estimations are open access. The projections are open access. You can also provide comments with regards to bettering the world. Now, in order to be able to talk to policymakers, to talk to people that decide on investments, to talk to cost-benefit analysis-minded people, it is important to convey the information that for every production and consumption activity, which are the basis of human welfare, humans produce and consume. You need, of course, the produce capital, the accounting capital, as we all know it, but you also need human capital and natural capital. And it is important to be able to monetize all of those, to know the economic value of all of those in order to make decisions. It is important to be able to know the contribution to the production and consumption of an economy of ecosystem services. And this is what we are bringing in the third World Ocean Assessment of the UN, a framework where we identify the different ecosystem services, categorizing them under the Millennium categorization, provisioning, culture, supporting, regulating, and then bringing in a framework that allows you through econometric analysis, statistical analysis, to monetize the benefits that derive from the existence, the resilience, and use of these ecosystem services. And all these benefits are very important because they are important in production and consumption services. And they are very important in getting the beyond GDP objective on the national accounts. This is why we need the national accounts to go beyond GDP, because ecosystem services are not counted in GDP, the gross national product. Natural capital is not accounted for in national accounts. So we need to value them. And this is, and the valuation exercise is very detailed, it's very active, it's data hungry, it's technical, but we need to value the different services of the different ecosystem, terrestrial, marine, freshwater, for the different biogeographical regions, and have a detailed valuation of the different services in different countries in order to be able to include them in our national accounts, in order to be able to include them as benefits in our cost-benefit accounts, and provide the financial and economic reasoning behind an investment that sustains the resilience and the functioning of of our oceans, of our seas. And this is exactly what RACC tried to do. RACC has been established in 2009, is the Regional Action Plan on Climate Change under the auspices of the Science and Technology Society Forum, under the auspices of Japan government, and it tries to develop and facilitate local action to address the challenges of climate change and sustainability via knowledge actions and network. And this year we focus as the International Committee of RACC on the health of oceans in order to address the emerging threats posed by climate change on world oceans, emphasizing the role of oceans in carbon absorption and regulation, highlighting the risk from temperature rise and acidification and pollution and overexploitation, and focusing on collaborative solutions to protect marine ecosystems. This is a call for the scientists to gather with the technology developers and provide an interactive framework to discuss with all other stakeholders, the politicians, the policymakers, the financiers, the businessmen, and women, and the civil society in order to co-design our pathways for resilient oceans so that they can support all of our human activity in the ocean: energy production, aquaculture, fisheries, transport, coastal management, including tourism, including cities, under the threat of climate change, extreme weather events, floods, heat waves, and so on. So again, it is an interdisciplinary and an intradisciplinary effort, and we all need to buy in. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Phoebe, and I know that you have to leave for another presentation.
I will come back to say goodbye.
Okay.
Thank you.
So next, we'll turn to Professor Adel El-Battaghi. He is a professor of arid land agriculture and graduate studies and research at Ain Shams University in Egypt, and he's also chair of the International Dryland Development Commission. And Adel, earlier in the week, we had a wonderful presentation that called attention to the fact that this year we have all three COPs. We have the Climate COP, we have the Biodiversity COP, and we have the Desertification COP. And we drew what we called a blue thread through all of those. And you and I have talked about that before, and the impact of the ocean on dry lands, on desertification. And so we're happy to welcome you and to hear more about climate change impacts on the hydrologic cycle and coastal vulnerability.
Thank you, Professor Margaret. Dear colleagues, I would like just to take you through the agony of the tragedy of the common. Oceans are suffering from the tragedy of the common, from greed, lack of understanding, lack of scientific input, lack of knowledge of what's going on in the aquatic system in the water, as well as the impact of the ocean on the impact of the ocean on human life on land. We are having increase in temperature. Now we are moving to 3 centigrade quite easily, and this is with the melting of ice. The oceans absorb a lot of heat, and this is translating to a melting of the ice sheets, as well as melting of the mountain tips. The first impact of sea level rise will be on the delta. World Bank has studied 80 deltas around the world, which is features by a low land, and there will be in Africa, for instance, we have an enormous impact on all the rivers in Africa, and adding to this, this is an amplification on this fact of the impact on the delta. The glaciers of Africa in Tanzania, the Kilimanjaro, Kenya, Uganda, Rwandese, will be gone by year 2040. Therefore, you have, in the beginning, you have floods, and after that you have a drought. And meanwhile, this all goes to the ocean, and the dynamic of the ocean as well will be impacted. In Africa, we know that there is major, I took 2 examples, the Niger Delta and the Nile Delta. Both of them will be affected tremendously, and between the 2 of them, it will affect the livelihood of about 100 people. The people will migrate from all land, which will have seawater intrusion. Salinization will be there. It impact the food production, and as well, it will impact tremendously the livelihood of people who depend on fisheries or agriculture in these areas. This is just a scenario by UNDP Greendale in Norway about the delta in Egypt, but it is As well, this phenomena will happen in Asia. It will happen in the Ganges and Mekong River and the Hindu Kush. Here we are talking about 3.3 billion people will be affected. It's a tremendous impact which will happen. Therefore, we need to be very careful in looking ahead and looking at the future and how we can interconnect all these issues together and look at not only what will happen in the ocean, but impact on agriculture, as well as a coping system in all these areas. What I would like really to stress here is that that Asia and Africa combined, the first impact will happen to 500 million people in Asia and Africa. Therefore, what happened in the ocean will have an impact. But what happened in the ocean impact as well impact as well fisheries. A lot of species, I mean, we are about 400 species which we know about, and probably domestically we use a fraction of this. It will be impacted as well. And therefore, what we are really going to have is suffering which will have an impact on food production. The issue of the hurricanes, I'm going backward. The hurricanes which will affect it comes from the ocean increase of temperature and the change of the environment. Therefore, we need to interconnect all that together and look at what Professor Konduri was talking about. All what is important for us and all what she said is the lack of adaptation capacity and lack of coping capacity. What we are hoping for, that human beings will have proper measurements to face the impact of climate change and to increase the coping and the adaptive capacity. You cannot do this if you don't understand the system. Therefore, we need to understand these systems which we are working on, and science and technology is very important for that. This what was talked about in different COPs before in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Dubai, but we need to implement this and we need to look at loss and damage, and good part of the loss and damage fund should go for research and for scientific research to enable countries to cope with this tragedy. I hope that we as human beings, I hope that we can disregard the gender, the age, the ethnicity, as well as the class, and work together. The have and have not should work together toward a solution. The ocean, it's a shame for us as human beings to have this lack of understanding, lack of knowledge about the ocean, which affecting us in daily life, not only for food, but it is for food, as well as for our environment and weather, as well as for the water supplies. And we need to know better. We need to support research institutions and people who are COP here and representing not only OECD countries, but developing countries, could stress that loss and damage fund, which could go to $1 trillion per year. Good part of this has to go to research and science for us to understand more. Without having this knowledge, we cannot do anything, neither in the global goals, which we have, the 17, which is coming to 2030, or to anything else. We need knowledge and result-based information, then we can go and have a bridge with the future. Thank you.
So, Adel, you've challenged us to think about these issues that we see so clearly in the ocean and the way they affect coastal communities, deltas, and so forth. Can you speak briefly about what you see in Egypt? You talked a little bit about the Nile Delta, but how does that reverberate into agriculture, fisheries, etc., in Egypt itself?
Yeah, in Egypt we had the delta of the Nile is very well exposed, and already with lysometers in the delta we see seawater, salt water intrusion in the delta, and this will affect at least until year 2030. It will affect at least more than half of the delta, which is the most fertile land in Egypt. And therefore it will affect our ability for food production. It means that Egypt will depend more in bringing food from outside. In addition to this, we have a lot of aquaculture, inland fishery, settlement in structures in the mouth of the delta. And this will be destroyed because you have to change, because salinity will be there. In addition to this, even water supply from the Nile is going to be affected if the supply will diminish with very erratic precipitation in the source. Therefore, we have the hydraulic cycle goes on the source of the Nile until you go to the Mediterranean. All this is going to be impacted or disrupted, and therefore we expect a lot of disruption, and the only way we can reverse this is through science. You need to put alternative strategies and policies to at least maintain your level of production and find alternative through science to this. Otherwise, the impact will be tremendous on the economy and the livelihood of the people. We expect by year 2050 that about between 10 to 12 million people has to move from the delta inside. And this out-migration or internal immigration is very disruptive as well.
And what sorts of alternatives is Egypt exploring now for to take care of the infiltration of salt water into the Nile and the impacts on agriculture?
We are translating this. I chair the Food and Agriculture Council in the Academy. We are putting programs for salt-tolerant plant, and we are supporting our genetic engineering lab institutions to bring up genetical makeup which will have tolerance to salinity with then less uptake for water, for fresh water, and the ability to survive under high salinity level. And meanwhile, we are trying to get out agriculture to the desert, to the dry areas, more and more, and try to optimize water use by intensification. We are building up intensification in protected plastic houses and so on, and with hydroponics, which use less water but give us more production from the same water, and you can reuse the cycle of the water all the time. Then the tool of intensification is very important, as well as how we can have salt-tolerant plant and agro-management techniques which will optimize water use. It's very important for us to do this. There is some trial with desalination. Desalination is still very expensive. I mean, years ago it was about $3 per 1 meter of fresh water. Now it dropped down to about 60 cents. And some people talk about 40 cents. But still, it's not economical in agriculture to use desalinized water. But all these frontiers has to be checked against reality of results coming from science and technology.
Fantastic. I think that one of the things we saw here for most of the week, our discussions here at the Ocean Pavilion have been sort of more restricted to the ocean itself and have been more restricted to the physical science itself. And I think that what we're trying to do is sort of enlarge the space to say, let's start looking at this from a systems perspective and invite in our colleagues who work on agriculture, on some of water availability, and some of the impacts that come from this.
One
Yes.
comment on the fisheries in the Mediterranean, not only the Mediterranean, even in all the oceans. We are talking about the change in the zooplankton and phytoplankton. And this change, because of the heat and the currents as well, is affecting the species of the fish, which is our fishermen are accustomed to in the Mediterranean. And this change as well invite predator fish, and it impact as well on disease and so on. And therefore, this we have to be very careful that the change is not happening on land as well, it's happening on the water itself. And it's happening in a different part with different ways. And we here collectively, globally, regionally, and nationally, we need to look at these changes in different oceans and check up what is the change and how we can take note of this and change things. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go back to RACC and the Science and Technology and Society Forum. One of the things, so I am a more recent attendee for the forum, and I know you have been there a long time. And one of the extraordinary things is that at any one of those meetings, there are usually somewhere around 20 Nobel laureates. There are presidents of corporations and vice presidents for research of corporations. We met with certainly Toyota, Mitsubishi, etc., the big ones from Japan, but also the global corporations like BASF and others. And it's an extraordinary opportunity to put something in front of those people that they may not encounter regularly. And so the Regional Action Group for Climate Change does that regularly. And could you talk a little about your long experience with seeing that play out at the STS Forum?
I think with the STS Forum and the RACC in particular, we have this direct dialogue with policymakers and so on, not only in the sessions or what we write as statement, but always in a lot of social gathering and meetings which take place in STS. STS now is going on for 20 years. The Regional Action for Climate Change is for 15 years. We started our first 3 years talking about the impact on urban settlement and in all continent, and how it will be impacted by climate change. Again, the ocean here has something to do with it because of sea level rise. And then after that, we have gone to the impact on the ecosystem of the dry area, where 2.5 billion people live in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. They live in Asia. They live from Morocco up to the Gobi Desert. It's one strip of dry area which is impacted. How we are going to salvage this 2.5 billion people and give them decent life rather than they immigrate, and you know the immigration to Europe or to the States, with some characters now coming as rulers of some states. They prevent this immigration, and therefore it's a havoc. And therefore you have to do something for these people to have decent life where they live. And you can do this only through science and technology. And this message we give to a lot of these leaders, and they understand this, and it's reflected in their dialogue in meetings like COP, several COPs, because they have knowledge, they heard what's going on, and they as you rightly said, they bring different picture for themselves. Even if they are committed to the other side, they know at least the argument or the impact, negative impact, which could come from the lack of action. The lack of action has a price to be paid by humanity. And eventually, they will pay the price as a politician as well. And therefore, they should be careful in their decisions in the future. We are hoping, as scientists who are usually naive, but we have to keep moving.
So the STS Forum always has an overarching theme for the forum, and I think one of the most interesting things last year was that the overarching theme was AI, and we're all talking about it, and they called it the lights and shadows of AI, the positive and the negative. And this was kind of a theme going through all of the sessions, but climate change was as well. And the forum always ends up with a group of about 8 rapporteurs that talk about everything that happened. And in this distinguished group, the heads of national science foundations and so forth, they ended last year's discussion that was supposed to focus primarily on AI with a statement that climate change was so much more important than the discussion of AI and had been ignored for so long at the STS Forum that they felt that we needed to take a look at the themes of the forum. So what we wanted to do was bring you a little insight from that alternate set of meetings and let you see the way that ocean and climate and the relationship between the two of them is reverberating outside of our own ocean pavilion, COP, where we put so much effort. And I think it was really an amazing session. We have a few minutes left, and I'll open it for questions if anybody has them.
Thank you, Margaret, for the wonderful event as usual. And thank you for bringing His Excellency Professor Beltagi to this event. My question will be about the assessment of the loss and damage, especially for the critical areas like the deltas and the problems we had. What the methodologies or the strategies or even the tools are being used now and how we could enhance them in the future. Thank you.
I think you have touched a very important issue, because if we don't have assessment, we don't know what happened. And even the assessment is not easy. People need to know if the impact is in ecological system. It means that you need to monitor what impact in the ecology. I mean, I'm not talking about agroecology, but ecology including the ocean, including the whole planet. And it has to be on now we have assessment with the different efforts in the climatology, but this is on a global level, rarely on the regional level, and you don't see a very good studies on local level. But if you talk about adaptation in Africa, what's really important, what hits is the local, the people who are living, who is going to be affected. If I have an increase in temperature with 4 centigrade in part in Africa, and this part in particular is between 2 mountains, totally different assessment will be there, because the environment there is different. And therefore we need to train. Human resources development is very important. Of course, Europe has done a lot of studies on the assessment of the impact of climate change. And they will take this as a measurement for justice in compensation in Europe. But what about Africa and Asia? We don't have our daughters and sons, the young generation who make this assessment, they don't have the knowledge. Then they have to be trained. They have to be trained in modeling, simulation modeling, as well as trained on how to get the sensors put and how to get the data and how to deal with big data and how to analyze it. All this training will enable them. Then if you don't empower these people, then you will have the global south outside of the equation. Then you are doing this for yourself. You have justice for Europe in its loss and damage. Where is justice for the loss and damage for Africa or for Asia? Billions of people there. 14% only of the population of the world live on OECD countries. Where is the rest of the world? The rest of the world is there, and it needs to wake up. Not only its leader has to take the charge and has to be very frank globally by saying no to propositions which does not help. Then we need the knowledge to be disseminated, because not for the sake of Africa or Asia, but for the sake of the have. Because for them, if we have a decent life in Africa and Asia, they don't have the problem of migration. We will have a better world for peace and prosperity. And this is one of the two goals of the global goals for sustainability. Peace is very important, as well as how we can secure food and water for all. And this is what we hope that we can achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Winifrida Shonde from Tanzania. And I'm late, but I thank God that I'm just direct to the thing which was bringing me in this ocean pavilion. As you said, in Tanzania, we faced a real thing in the ocean, especially for island community. We had Mafia Island, Jibondo Island in Tanzania, who are fully depending on the ocean on their daily activities. Even their daily living, they depend on the ocean by cultivating seaweed plantation. So as per our NGO, we had two initiatives due to the same pavilion who agreed on Dubai, while focusing on that we have to do in action whatever you are, whoever you are, we need to act in the law community. So I'm just seeking, if we had that kind of presentation like this, and in our country we see the output, we see the impact, we see that we move from point A to point B, as we said that those law community, we are the one who attending this COP. But on our home country, we left a lot of the community in the ground who are suffering. So I'm calling upon if we have any strategies to assist in making these people understand, build their capacity, understanding, because one by one we can't achieve the whole community. Especially for our NGO, it's not enough. We reached almost 80,000 women around the coast who are seaweed cultivating. But there are big population along the islands who are depending on Indian Ocean. We call upon if there is any way to deal with the African country like Tanzania specifically, Mafia Island, which is a big marine park. How can we help these people to understand them that the ocean is their responsibility? They have to save it. They need to make it available for the generation and the generation. And number two, how are we going to help these communities around? making that them become the ambassador to others. We know that we can raise the voice. Maybe we come on the mainland where there's even no ocean. But if we make these people who are just seeing the water around them as their source and their everything, maybe also they can be a good ambassador and help to reach the target at large. And number 3, we realized that on their plantation, there are disappearance of some marine species due to maybe the way of they are using the technology or some things and loss of some coral reefs. But if we get researchers and people who can come to those specific area, we are ready to help them to show the mapping, because we already have the mapping, so that then they go to research what we have now, so that we keep it for generation and generation. Because some of the species for our side, we realize that also not only helping those to cultivate seaweed, but also they help to sink carbon. So if we get more researchers, more technology, maybe we can have a solution when we come COP30. We have something on hand in reality, not stories or not reports. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this up. You may not have been here at some of the earlier sessions, but this point that you made was so important, that it's not only scientific capacity that's needed, but also understanding the capacity to have the population understand that there are solutions, that they don't have to accept the situation as it is. And so it's the capacity to act locally, as well as the capacity for the scientific community to help with that action. Thank you so much. And thank all of you. I'm sorry, they've been telling me to wrap up, but people will be here so you can mingle and ask. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to bringing some more conversations about systems analysis, about the social action that's necessary to deal with these issues for the ocean as well.